All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. I'm Paula Shapoulis with the Blue Ox Business Academy of the Brainerd Lakes Chamber. And you are at one of our success series, How to Protect Your Business from Ransomware. And as you know, and why you're here, this is a very relevant topic right now. And we are super excited to have Jim Main with us today with Deerwood Technology. And Jim has been in this industry for more than 40 years. He has delivered wonderful business solutions to his clients and has filled key roles in enterprise technology organizations. So he also has a master's degree in business administration from the University of St. Thomas, an undergrad from the U of M, and has multiple different certificates in this industry. And he is a US Navy veteran. So thank you very much, Jim, for your service. He's also very involved with his community and his family. And we are just really excited that he is here with us today. And I am going to turn it over to Jim. Please help me in welcoming Jim Main.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time to attend today. Our session today is about ransomware. Today, we'll define ransomware, describe who are the targets. We'll detail who are the threat actors and how they attack. And while threats and risks of ransomware and cybercrime are real, there's no single silver bullet that will eliminate these risks, the situation is far from hopeless. We'll also cover today specific actions you and your organization can take. We'll discuss risk in a general sense and how to manage it. And then we'll cover the 3 Ps: prevent, protect, and prevail. Finally, we'll share resources that will help you learn more. Encryption technology was originally developed many years ago to secure messages and messages that are in transit across networks and at rest on storage media. Mathematical algorithms and keys are used to both encrypt and decrypt important and sensitive information. Unfortunately, ransomware wasn't all that far behind the development of encryption technology. We will not spend time today to present the technical and geek aspects of ransomware. Rather, we'll discuss ransomware's business relevance and what you can do about it. So the upcoming poll questions will help us all get a sense of those attending today. So, Paula, I don't know, do I need to do anything or you're in charge? There they come. So here are some questions that help characterize an organization. How many locations do you conduct business from? How many employees are part of your organization? Where are your key and mission critical business systems located? And then if you can share, have you and or your firm encountered a cybersecurity incident? So while everybody's completing those, prior to the pandemic, cloud systems were a planned aspiration for many businesses. Today, it's the norm. The velocity and volume of cloud migrations have been unprecedented since the pandemic. Before and after, capable and solid and secure IT networks were important to every organization. Today, for many businesses, the network is the organization. Distance learning, remote work, and collaborations are all assumed to be the norm today. So I think that's probably plenty of time to get those poll questions answered. So we'll continue. So why attend this webinar in the first place? Recent attacks and breaches in the news are from SolarWinds, and they're an enterprise IT software company and solution. The incident from SolarWinds affected Fortune 500 businesses and many government agencies. Another one you may recall would be the Colonial Pipeline. That shut down oil production and distribution nationwide with far-reaching impacts even to the gas pump. And then lastly, in early July here, a software company, Kaseya, was the victim of another supply chain attack. And so you will maybe refer to that later on in the presentation too. But those types of attacks are accomplished through software that are either used directly by companies or sometimes even by their service providers that companies contract with. Now, Kaseya obtained a decryptor key to help people recover from this Revel ransomware attack that occurred recently. And they didn't really say whether they paid a ransom to get that key or not. But the deal is that it's just becoming so prevalent, and it's not just the IT areas of an organization that are aware of them. It's front page news, and it's affecting people at an ever increasing rate. So risk is increasing for many reasons. First, it's incredibly profitable. Organized crime, we'll talk more about that, used to make their money by other means. Extortion, in the sense of protection money, the ability to do business in a town or in a city or an area. Of course, drugs and other illicit activities used to be the prime domains of organized crime. But now the return on investment and the effort and ease with which money can be obtained through organized crime, cybercrime is their primary domain. The supply chain exploits we talked about before, when you think about all of the individuals and vendors that you do business with that may have some access to your organization electronically, those are many times easy avenues for threat actors to obtain access to your organization. So there are many examples. We've discussed some of the national ones, but there are local incidents that have occurred in our region. They certainly weren't as highly publicized. I know of a local city, the city of Braham in central Minnesota, that was affected very recently. And I know also that the National Association of Cities and Municipalities passed a resolution in 2020 to resolve to not pay ransomware demands as a means of hopefully becoming less of a target. However, the ransomware that locks up clients' data and servers, our company has had clients whose systems have been affected by ransomware, and fortunately, the data backups and recovery testing and practice that we have will allow them to recover without having to pay the ransom. But that doesn't always happen, and as we'll talk further here, sometimes the impacts are much more broad. So the ransomware itself, the ransom payment itself is usually a large percentage of the financial impact. According to a survey by Cyber Reason, 35% of respondents who paid a ransom said they shelled out between $350,000 and $1.4 million, while 7% paid more than 1.4 million. The next biggest financial impact is a loss of revenue from the interruption to a business operations. The location and size and industry of those attacked is playing less of a role in the extent of the financial damage, and unfortunately, no organization is immune anymore. Over 50% of the people in this survey also suffered some sort of brand or reputation damage. And organizations hit by ransomware, they face a key decision whether they should pay or not. Some feel it's their only alternative. However, paying a ransomware is no guarantee that your data will be recovered or that you'll be free from further attacks. Almost 50% reported that the attackers regained access to their files and systems after an attack. And some also reported when they recovered data, it was corrupted. We'll discuss that a sound business continuity process, backups, disaster recovery, and related procedures that can restore systems and business operations and prevent from having to pay ransomware demands. So who are the perpetrators here? So we talked about organized crime and why and how they're one of the primary offenders or threat actors, but nation states too, as you've read about in the news or heard about, I'm sure too. Different countries, North Korea, Russia, and others. And the reality is that if you want to call it the front of warfare between nation states is really now cybercrime. And there are a lot of political and policy decisions being made and offered to help combat that. And we'll actually talk about some of the federal resources that even businesses and nonprofit and other organizations can take advantage of too. Lastly, there's quite a division of labor and specialists within the cybercrime industry. There are those that extort for money in the ransomware case, but when your data and systems have been affected by ransomware, you can be assured that your data has likely been harvested as well. Those harvest specialists then in turn place your data out for sale, and people will obtain that data and then use that data to provide other ways of generating income and monetizing that data itself. So there's a large group of folks involved, and what's evolving is categories of specialists in each sense. So businesses are really ranked by the following factors here. Sometimes it's the value of their information, but often it's just the vulnerability to the threat of ransomware. And when a criminal goes to obtain something and profit from it, it's much simpler to go to a place where the defense mechanisms and protection facilities are lower. The analogy is you don't go to Fort Knox to steal gold. You go somewhere else where it's going to be much easier. The threat actors also have ways of analyzing sometimes even publicly available information to see who has the highest ability to pay, and those companies become targets. So of course many small businesses will think that they're not a target because the value of your information is relatively low. Well, again, that may not be the case. As we've discussed, the impact can be pronounced in any case. But the types of information that are of value to cyber criminals include healthcare information, because they can file false claims against insurance companies or Medicare, for instance. Any type of personal identifiable information, um, address, birth date, sometimes social security number, can be monetized, with identity theft as the goal. And then, of course, credit card data. If credit card data is obtained, uh, fraudulent transactions often occur, and there's whole industries, particularly um, um, the payment card industry, that has put many defense mechanisms in place, but it still occurs. So that, as I mentioned, if data can be encrypted, it's also data that can be harvested, and the dark web is the place where these types of transactions, software to conduct and perpetrate malware and ransomware, is also available for sale. As we discussed, small businesses are targeted at nearly the same rate, according to a recent survey by Agility. And it's because these attacks can be replicated with software packages. Some organizations in the cybercrime world even have help desks that people can talk to and learn about the finer points of conducting an attack and monetizing it, again, for a fee. The cost of these cyber attacks has been increasing in recent years. This graph here shows um, that increase, and it also shows that ransomware attacks and the impact of them is increasing in terms of the duration of the effect after an attack has been undertaken. So we've seen that the threats and risks to ransomware are posed. There should be a concern for all organizations. And we'll pause at this point to see if you have any questions. Um, but rest assured, we'll look next at what your organization can do about these risks.
Jim, I don't have any questions in the chat box, but if
Okay.
someone wants to raise their hand and you have a question, you're welcome to go to reactions. It's on the lower part of your screen. Click that and then click raise hand, and it'll just bring you up to the top of the list, and then you can lower it once the question's answered. So feel free to do that if you like.
Well, hearing none, we'll continue on. So next, we'll take a deeper dive into the anatomy of ransomware, what it looks like. We'll also talk about how and why cybercriminals operate these schemes and efforts. Next, we'll talk more about risk management in some level of detail to help you frame your response to risk in general, but also cyber threats. Then we'll talk about preparing yourself for this event. And while it may not seem that it's inevitable, it really is becoming more of a when, not if, this happens in your world or in your organization. But we'll also talk about those steps and some other resources you can make yourself available to you to learn more. All right, we already talked about the definition of ransomware. Through some means, software is activated within your organization. It could be that someone clicked on a attachment, provided credentials in a phishing email. Um, Phishing emails aren't the only vector that are used anymore. Voicemail and phone calls are often used. Smishing is using texts. Of course, I think we all receive various types of um, attempts to get us to respond to or click on a link in a text message. But more and more, the actors are using multiple means. One means corroborating the other that makes their request for access or information to gain access into your system more credible. Some of the other vulnerability areas that allow malware and ransomware to enter your environment is when your networks, um, desktops, laptops, and your servers are not patched, or you continue to run systems that are unsupported, meaning the vendor no longer even provides updates to security threats. And of course, more and more, it's not just computers, right? It's any network device in your environment. That could be surveillance cameras, that could be thermostats and networked or internet accessed uh, uh, heating and cooling control. Um, in many retail organizations, everything from the jukebox to the dartboard to the cash machine is all connected via the network these days. And when those devices are left unprotected or configured in the wrong way, um, something as simple as leaving the default password. We find in businesses, especially smaller ones, um, using more consumer-oriented products and devices that don't have the same level of security is often the easiest way that malware can enter an environment. And then just password management and controls, and having something other than the default password that's um, significantly tougher to crack by being longer or more complex. Um, Hackers have so many tools to be able to brute force their way into a device or an environment by trying all possible combinations of passwords to gain access. And it's important to note that the malware that encrypts an organization's data to perpetrate a ransomware attack doesn't necessarily start encrypting data and throwing up a screen demanding payment all at once. The actors today will get malware into an environment, and they will sit and watch, and they will collect information, feed it back for different types of analysis. I'm sure many of you may have seen um, emails or even text messages that appear to come from an organization's leader, say the president or a CFO, that says, "Hey, I need you to send me some gift cards. Don't bother with email. Just take a picture of them." And sometimes, amazingly, these messages come when the executive or the leader of the organization is out of town, maybe traveling on a business trip or whatever. And sometimes that can be evidence that attackers have been in the environment for a while, have access to that individual's calendar, and know when they're either in the office or out at a given time. So somehow, however malware gets into an environment, they'll sit and watch. Sometimes the information is keyboard loggers, but there's a lot of intelligence gathering that usually goes on in advance of actually putting up a demand or encrypting an organization's data. So when your organization realizes that an attack has occurred, your immediate goal, of course, should be to minimize the impact and loss. So like a burglary or a theft, there's an emotional effect of kind of intrusion and violation. But even though that happens, it's important to stay focused and calm. And the key goal is to first contain the cyber attack. You want to stop and minimize the damage that it can cause. So oftentimes the first knee-jerk reaction is to shut down a computer. And actually, the experts recommend that instead of doing that, the first thing you do is to disconnect the local network of your organization from the internet so that the perpetrators aren't continuing to receive information about your environment. The second step would be to disconnect any backup devices for your systems. If you have backups, sometimes the ability to encrypt those backups can be limited, and that can affect a successful recovery. And retaining information about the attack for forensic purposes later is best accomplished by hibernating your computers instead of shutting them off. Oftentimes, shutting off a computer and then restarting it again causes further damage. So, and of course, not all computers have a hibernate function. Laptops often do just by closing the lid, but even desktop computers often have a hibernate function these days as well. Also, early on, when you realize that you've been the victim of attack, you should change your passwords, especially for cloud systems, because if those systems haven't been accessed yet, that may certainly be one of the next steps that the attackers take. Getting the experts in, getting folks that know what to do and how to proceed is important as well. They can help understand how the attack was accomplished and then work to mitigate any future attacks. But the primary focus from a business impact standpoint is on recovery. And that recovery may take the form of implementing manual processes and procedures to continue your business. Then, of course, restoring your systems from backups, rebuilding computers that have been infected or damaged, and then getting your business back up and running in any way, sense, and form that you can is the key. So let's talk about risk in the general sense. And there are many types of risk a business encounters. There's economic risk. There's people risk. Your key staff members and employees. And IT and cybersecurity risk is just one more. There are really three ways to deal with business risk. An organization can accept the risk, mitigate it, or transfer it. So some of the types of risks that many businesses simply accept are region-wide catastrophic events, those with broad economic impact. Um, the pandemic, COVID itself, is one that, of course, most organizations, no one, in fact, foresaw with great accuracy or detail. These types of events are either a low likelihood of occurring, or there's just nothing an organization can do. You really can't take appropriate steps. And like we mentioned before, there's a perception by many small businesses that they're not a target or susceptible to cybercrime, and you may think there's not much you can do about it, but there is. So transferring risk we're talking in the cybersecurity sense and in other general business risk cases about insurance. So there, as you know, insurance policies and coverages for many types of things, and then cybersecurity insurance is a hot deal right now for every organization and business. But like any insurance, the policy, the devil's in the details. The analogy I can give is one of, say, homeowners insurance and um, being covered for a burglary or a break-in. And when you go to file your claim for the items that were lost or damaged in the break-in, you find out from your insurance company that, oh, that's fine, thank you for your claim. We find you didn't have a deadbolt door or a deadbolt lock on your front door. I'm sorry, but um, our policy is to not pay claims if you haven't taken reasonable efforts to prevent a loss, and that's very standard in all insurance areas. Due care and due diligence to prevent the loss is often a requirement. And what we're talking about here is actually insurance policies, again, that are intended to transfer risk require some level actions or means to mitigate risk as well. So having a cybersecurity policy is sound advice and highly recommended, but one does need to understand fully what that policy covers and what actions are required for the insurance company to pay a claim. So many legacy data protection and security solutions, and what I'm talking about is antivirus software on computers, they're just not effective against today's modern cyber threats. An organization needs to think about solutions with using current technologies that are monitoring your IT environment, addressing the human elements, and we'll talk a little more about that here shortly. You need to do more than just have antivirus software running on endpoint computers these days to stay one step ahead of malicious attackers.
So Jim,
Yes.
before we get too far along with this, there is a question in the chat box, and I'm wondering if you'd like to answer that now, or we can wait. But it's sort of related to what we had just talked about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Sarah asks, who would be the expert to call in the event of a ransomware attack? And should law enforcement be contacted, and do they have cyber experts that can help?
Law enforcement is certainly part of a incident response communication plan to notify them. We haven't seen law enforcement take an active role in resolving or restoring a business from that standpoint, but they can be involved in the forensic work after the fact to determine who and how. And certainly if your organization has cyber insurance coverage, insurance companies have resources that will help, of course, prevent their payment loss payment, pardon me, and can also be involved in some of the forensics as well. IT specialists, third parties, are often called in to do some of that forensic work, but nowadays even insurance companies have some staff that will help direct. So the key is proactively understanding your organization risks and vulnerabilities and developing some sort of an incident response plan. I hope that answers the question. If not, ask again or.
Well, that brings up a follow-up question for me. And Sarah says, thank you, by the way. The question that I have in response to that is there a rider that you get along with an insurance? It sounds like our insurance companies will provide some of this in addition to the IT help. But do our local insurance agents, are you aware? Is it like an umbrella that you purchase, a rider? Um, is it completely separate? Are you aware of any of that?
No, general business insurance companies are providing cyber security insurance riders, and one as a business or a nonprofit or a government organization, schools, whatever, they all are working with their insurance agents. And again, not all policies are created equal. And as I mentioned, this is a very active area of insurance right now. The costs are high because the claims are high. But like I said, making sure as a business leader or owner that you understand fully what's covered and what your responsibilities are. I mean, that's really the case for any insurance coverage for any business risk.
Great, thanks, Jim. At this time, there aren't any other questions yet. So
Okay.
if anyone has a question, feel free to put it in chat or raise your hand.
So, like we talked about in terms of risk, you can accept some risks, you can transfer the risk through insurance, and even when you do those things and have insurance coverage, there's always some level of mitigation and due care and due diligence, which is really just common sense for any organization. You have to manage the risk in some way. So for those risks that you do decide to mitigate, and the three P's, it's kind of a catchy way to give a high level approach to tackling being prepared. And so looking at things from this multi-layered sense and looking at security solutions in that manner is the key to prevention. Not an antivirus software product on a computer isn't going to do it anymore. Looking at both your network and all of the non-computer devices as well as the computers, keeping your documentation, especially an incident response plan intact, and using the right tools and processes. As we mentioned, some are around the human element of um, these cyber threats is key. And then if and when an incident does occur, business continuity, thinking things through from a business standpoint. How will I deal with getting myself and my organization back in business? And in large organizations, there's a high degree of recovery exercises, recovery testing, but thinking through these issues, even as a small business owner, is the key. And putting some level of documentation in place to say, what will I do? Because as we talked, emotions ride high in the heat of an incident, and you need to have a plan in place. And if it's practiced and rehearsed, it's going to be even more effective. Just what we talked about. Build that plan ahead of time. Have security facilities in at your network edge where your internet comes in and the network begins in the public internet, as well as throughout your network and endpoints. Um, Turning your staff and yourself into human firewalls through education and training, knowing what and when and how attacks occur, the common things to look at in emails, voicemails, and text is key. Hygiene practices, we talked about password complexity and good password hygiene, but um, really security awareness programs beyond training help bring the culture of cybersecurity into an organization. And again, as a small business, you can educate yourself and take that training. In larger organizations, It's just like any other program within a business that you need to raise awareness about and keep front burner for you and your team requires that bit of forethought. There are professional approaches also to thinking like the bad guy, and larger organizations have separate people responsible for security from their other IT um, configuration and ongoing management, and they form a set of people called a red team that attempt to get into their business environment, and a blue team that's actively trying to prevent them. And through these red blue team exercises, companies gain valuable insights on things that they can do. Um, Very large organizations have these people on staff, but most organizations today would contract a security company to perform these types of exercises. There's also, to continue on the color analogy, the white hat people are hackers or ethical hackers, as they call them, that do what they do for good to help identify vulnerabilities in the first place. The black hats are those threat actors that are trying to extort and monetize vulnerabilities in environment. And I guess the gray hat hackers are those that are maybe not after the money, but they're after some form of notoriety. And that kind of talks more to a day I think has gone by where um, notoriety and making a name for yourself um, doesn't mean much anymore, given the value that the cybercrime returns on the investments and the efforts anymore. So identifying and prioritizing your business risks by conducting a risk and vulnerability assessment that is tuned to your industry vertical and maybe even your business demographics is an outstanding place to start. And we talked a little bit too about this isn't a one and done exercise anymore. The threat vectors and the things that are creating risks in an environment are continuously changing. So, on a cadence of some sort, um, quarterly, semi annually, looking at and determining what new gaps may exist or where you are in your roadmap to closing gaps that have been previously identified is key. From an initial assessment, an organization may determine that they don't have the resources or time to close all risks, and that's why prioritizing them is important. But by reviewing your vulnerabilities and risks on a periodic basis, you can determine and map your progress and your plans to go further. The technical threats are evolving, and as we've heard, there are many of what they call zero-day attacks. The attack is perpetrated even before anybody knew there was a vulnerability, and that's what organizations are most looking for solutions to help prevent. So, from a protection standpoint, developing and testing sound backup procedures, looking at the types of activities that you will do in the immediate sense. Many organizations are required from a regulatory compliance standpoint to take certain activities, disclose issues, incidents, and breaches to their clients or to other industry points of contact. The goal overall is to create procedures and that save valuable data before the potential event is happening. Training your employees, giving them tools to manage credentials, and then accessing expert resources that are looking for traces and tracks of your organization on the dark web and identifying vulnerabilities on an active basis. So I'm hoping we've provided a sense that there are actions that you can take, and we'll continue to focus on the planning aspect to what you will do if and when an incident occurs, things that you can do to recover when they occur, putting operational procedures, and they may be, as I mentioned, manual systems. Can you process a credit card transaction by some other means? Can you conduct a sale by paper? I know we mentioned this before, but if a company paid ransomware once, they're likely to be asked to pay again. There was a recent survey or source conducted, Cyber Reason is the name of the company, that 8 of 10 organizations hit by a ransomware attack and elected to pay were attacked a second time, sometimes by the same threat actor, but sometimes not. So the federal government has this little deeper framework that we're going to provide a link to for you. And it starts with identifying the information and prioritizing the processes that are critical to your business, and then developing a plan for business continuation in the event of a disaster or incident. That's to protect. Monitoring for and acting on flagrant and suspicious activity is a detect phase um, process. And then using your incident response plan and having that in advance of the incident to methodically step through all of the aspects of responding, and then focusing on recovery in a priority manner based on what information and systems are most key to your organization. Another recent initiative from the federal government is this Stop Ransomware site. And this brings together resources from across many federal agencies into one location. And we've referred to this repeatedly ourselves as we help our clients move through um, their response to planning for cyber threats. And as you have probably heard in the news, these types of resources will continue to be even more available. So this this page has the links to that NIST cybersecurity framework, as well as the Stop Ransomware website. And then our company, of course, has a few here too that will be made available probably in the chat, as well as I know this deck and the webinar itself will be recorded and you can access them there. And we want to offer anyone attending this webinar or any organization um, a risk and vulnerability assessment. And this is ways that we can help you at least get a start by understanding the priorities and aspects. This isn't a technical vulnerability scan or a penetration test of your company's network and environment. It's really a business-based questionnaire, and then we use a tool that helps score your organization within your industry, as well as it will look at the answers to your questions and prioritize them by critical, um, um, serious, and lesser so, that can help you develop a roadmap. So the link you see here will allow you to notify us that you're interested in that sort of an assessment. So are there any final questions, thoughts or comments?
I don't have any questions in the chat box right now.
All right.
But if there are questions, certainly feel free to come off mute and ask Jim directly. And maybe while you're considering that or we're waiting, Jim, I just want to thank you for the thorough program today. One of the things that, and I've sat through a couple of these now, and quite frankly, I had an incident happen about 6 months ago where I was hacked through Facebook on my business page. And once they got in there, they shut me down and then they started running ads and charging them through my PayPal account that was connected to Facebook. And I caught it, and Facebook and PayPal both refunded, but it took me some time to recover that. And it was very difficult. And I had recalled what you had said in the previous session. And I instituted password, or 1Password, I think you had recommended at that time, for all of your password protection and things like that. So I just want to thank you for the work that you do. But I also love that you shared disconnect from the internet. You know, if this happens, disconnect from the internet, disconnect your backups from your device.
Yep.
Retain info about the attack. So hibernate your computer and not shut it down, which I probably would have just shut it down. Change your passwords, call an expert, and it will probably all be calling our insurance agents at this point. So thank you for that. And just those pieces of information that allows us to do something when this happens is so critical.
No.
Any other? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, no, that any of those things that folks have questions on, I know for a lot of our clients, we help in the review and analysis of cyber insurance policies. That's a piece of what we do. As I said, many of the mitigation steps are in fact those due diligence or due care requirements, and people have questions on those as well. So we're glad to provide whatever assistance we can.
Yeah, and all of those links that Carrie so graciously put into the chat for you, I will also ask them to send that to us. I'll send an email out to everyone who's registered that will include all of those links and will include the recording. Right. So I'll have that as well. Any other questions? I don't see anything more in chat. And so thank you so much, Jim, for the presentation. And I just want to remind everybody, we have our leadership experience coming up in September. So if you've never experienced that, it's an amazing program that builds leadership skills, gets you behind the scenes in the community, and really builds strong relationships with your cohort. So that starts in September. You can register at any time. We are also working on a success series that will be a 3-part series on workforce issues and tips and tools for you that will help. And just know that we as a chamber are working behind the scenes quite diligently on this whole aspect of workforce shortage. So appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much again, Jim, for all that you do and the offer of doing the assessment. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, and thank everyone for attending. Appreciate your time.